through 4 Bibles. And we got one on the phone. Everybody got a phone but the preacher? All right. Okay, good. Archie, we want to get it on. Get it on. There we go. That way it can go out on Facebook. That's why you go to Facebook and look. I don't think many people do. But if you want to, or you miss it, you can do that. I don't know if you can hear it, but you can try. Right? Okay, so Archie, we want to forego that scripture this morning. I have, because if I do it, I'm just going to go back and do it again tomorrow. Because I'm just not going to get, I know me, I'm just not going to get that far. Okay, I'm not going to get that far. And so I'm going to, this morning, is kind of set the stage. And then there are some things that I want to say about that. And then I'm going to let that be it. I'm not going to bite off too much this morning. So we're in the book of Judges, and let me give you a moment, find chapter 1 and verse 1. I do is chapter 1, verse 1 says, Now after the death of Joshua, it came to pass that the children of Israel asked the Lord the Canaanites and to fight against them. So we have been in the creation week looking at what the Bible had to say about Genesis chapter 1, and I just decided to the book of Judges, but I want to kind of set the stage for you, and just maybe prepare you for the book of Judges, because I think we're just going to move through the book of Judges. Now, I don't know if I'm going to cut, how much I'm going to go, and being a little spontaneous with this, but I feel impressed to go to Judges and begin Judges, and I may go all the way through Judges, and we'll see, okay, so I'm exactly, but we're kind of looking here to start with this first chapter of Judges. Now, to bring you up to speed with the book of Judges, I don't know if is there anybody here that has read the book of Judges? Wow, very good. We have several here that's read the book of Judges. Awesome. It may have been a while since you have read Judges. Okay, so if you're like me, you forget that, you just can't keep up with all of it. And so, but in the first 5 books of Moses, and we have the law, who makes his appearance, and God calls this man. Israel really didn't become a nation until they were in Egypt and in bondage. Okay, and so because basically there was only 70 of them. There was only 70 of the children of Israel, so they really weren't a nation. Well, they should have never went to Egypt, but there was a famine in the land, and Abraham, took his. But I'm saying they really shouldn't have done it that way. Egypt's always a downfall. See that in the Bible. If it's got to do with Egypt, it's not good, because God wanted his people not there. They were hungry and they went there. And you say, well, what else were they going to do, preacher? Well, they were going to rely on God to provide during the time of famine. Okay? Now, this is a hard lesson. Like that we're in need. A lot of times, rather than follow the leadership of the Lord, we follow our own thoughts and we will go our own way. Now, listen, this is something I'm going to come back to again and again and again. So Israel, the family that is, Abraham's family, they go in and 70 of them, and they stay, and then they grow. I mean, God multiplies. Why? and they multiplied like crazy. This is where Israel become a nation. Why they were in bondage in Egypt. In fact, it's been, when they got so many, let me back up and say, they got so many that Pharaoh became afraid. The new Pharaoh of the land became afraid. That they felt like if we don't come down and control them and put them in their place, make slaves of these people, control them, they're liable to rise up against us with their different belief system and their different ways. They put them in a bondage. And they were in bondage for 400 years. Now, 4 is an important number in the Bible. And 40 and 400. And these are biblical numbers that, and 400 is going to reappear in the book of Judges. So they were in bondage for 400 years. And Pharaoh went down to Egypt. Had they stayed in their own land. But rather, they took matters in their own hands and they go down there. And so they began to pray, obviously. I'm saying they. Then God sent a deliverer. And now they are a nation. Because it was estimated up to 2 million. Up to. So they go at 70 and they leave a nation of people, right? And God they multiply like rabbits, okay? Yeah, I know the sheriff got in trouble for that comment, but I think I'm multiply like, most of you don't want to say so, I'm not going to. So, they multiply like rabbits, and there was so many to deliver them out of slavery and out of bondage, okay? And basically, Egypt was a sign, a symbol, spiritually, of sin. And God delivered them to the promised land, freedom in God. And the Holy Land, regardless of, I know people say different things about it, it's always in a symbol of heaven, and it's a symbol of God's fulfillment through His promises and a better life. Down here, a better life. So God sends His deliverer, Moses. And Moses is the one who authored the first 5 books. Obviously, no, he wasn't alive in the first of Genesis, but apparently it was handed down orally and perhaps written. And anyway, we don't have that kind of record, but and then Moses took and wrote the whole thing going all the way back, the first 5 books. That's the way I understand it. Moses' job was to deliver them from bondage to the promised land. But the people just won't read inside. They won't read in their faith. And they complain, and they complain, and they complain. God did. And finally, after 10 times, God says, you know what? You don't believe it? It ain't going to happen. So all of you, your carcass is going to fall in this wilderness, since you don't believe it anyway. Right, 40 years. So then when the time was up, and all those who were over 20 years old, that God considered the adults that shouldn't have done, they were all dead. Well, now a new generation comes up. A new generation, the younger generation, who were not responsible for what their parents had done. And God says, I'm going to deliver you to the promised land, and I'm going to do it through your children. So now, Moses is instructed to start moving forward after these 40 years, and Moses makes it up to the Jordan, and gets up to there, and then that's it. God's done with Moses. When God's done with you, what happens? If He's using you and God's done with a believer in the Lord and you're still around, God not done with you, when He's done with you, He's going to take you home and He's going to replace you. Nobody's. So He was done with Moses. He called Moses home. So that's the first 5 books. That's kind of summed up in that manner. Now God raises. Now these weren't kings. These were men of God that God called through, and then that word they were going to give to the people. So Joshua was raised up. Joshua had good experience all these years, and he took to him as the leader of Israel. And now we had that book of Joshua, which is the 6th book. Joshua's responsibility at this point is to now take the children of Israel into the promised land. Joshua was a mighty man of courage and faith, because all that went along with what Joshua was supposed to do. Joshua wasn't scared of nothing. I'm just going to tell you, he wasn't scared of nothing and nobody. And he was a faithful man to God. So the book of Joshua tells about the conquest of Israel. As Joshua was going in, I kind of went there, but I just chose to skip it and move on. And Joshua took them into, it was a high time with Israel. It was a high time in Israel, and they fight these different nations, and God has given them this promised land. It was a wonderful time. It was and showing themselves proud, and they were gaining, and they were taking ground, moving forward in the Lord. And then comes the book of Judges. And that's what when we read, I think a moment ago, didn't I read verse 1? After the death of Joshua, it came to pass, the children of Israel, they asked the See, the leader always besought God and says, when Joshua like, Lord, should we go in and fight these people? And God would come back with the answer, yes. And Moses sent the spies, and you remember, and the word from these spies came back, right, and most of there, and these giants are there. We can't go in. We're like grasshoppers compared to giants. And only 2 men, which was right, Joshua and Caleb. He said, we should go up at once, and we're well able to do it because God is with us. But the majority of them, right, said, no, we can't do it. I think it was 10 of them, right? No, we can't do it. But Joshua was a man of faith. So Joshua died, as we find in the first of Judges. Now it's going to be, in fact, after this verse, it kind of goes back a little bit into the time when Joshua was still alive, because you'll notice, if you will, when you get in chapter 2, I'll read verse 7 down maybe a little bit. So the people served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua, who had seen all the great works. Now Joshua, the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died when he was 110 years old. So basically, it starts off verse 1 saying Joshua was dead, but then it gets there and it says now Joshua. Overview in verse 1. That basically this book of Judges is going to be about a period of time after the death. Back in these other verses up to this death that I mentioned, chapter 2. I hope I'm explaining this. Read it and see if you can understand it. And so it kind of goes, it kind of goes back after verse 1, telling you about a little bit up until Joshua did die. I hope that makes sense to you. So, and what we find in this book of Judges is not a high time right on with Israel. Like now we see this as a low time in the nation of Israel. Even though that we have all these heroes like Gideon and Samson and all these powerful people, and yet it's still a bad time with Israel. And we see them not. Okay? So, the thing about it is, during that time when they were obedient, during the time they were going into what God wanted to do, things were good. Okay? So then I have to pause right there because there are two things that I wanted to really point out. And that is, as long as we are being obedient to God, as long as we're doing what God wants us to do, then we're going to. And I think evidence of that to the believers, if you've been saved a long time, knowing the Lord, and you've known the Lord for a long time, I think, you can look back through your life and you have to be honest and say that some of the best times in your life were the times that you were closest to God. Faithful to God, right? There were the times when you were attending church regularly, you was excited about your faith, and you was into the Word, and you was. It would be your most prosperous financially time in your life. Financial. You may look back and it may be a time period that really wasn't good financially, or really wasn't good. Struggled with some issues. Maybe it was a difficult family time. It may not necessarily been materially. But nonetheless, I think we'd all be safe to say that the Lord was the best times of our life. Just like it was with the nation of Israel. That was their best time. With everybody. Once again, it may not necessarily be financially. May not be everything working right. In fact, sometimes it could be the opposite. Is it's not God's fault for that. It's our fault. Because when everything goes good in our life and things are well, do our own thing. We can do our own way. Those are typically when things are going good, we're just not as faithful in our devotion. We're not as faithful to God or to reading or praying. And we're busy. We're busy enjoying the fruits of our labors. Things drop and things get really bad. Right? At the time we turn more fervently over to the Lord. I think we all have to be honest about that, okay? And I try to call on God's name regularly, right? But good. You don't feel like you have as much to pray for. And little do we know that what Satan might be planning right and to tear us down spiritually and to tear us down from where we're at. And so sometimes, actually, all the time is a good time to call upon them. In the high times of our life, because the low times are around the corner. Difficulties are around the corner. And we may not be prepared for them. And so God uses that. There are times of the Lord. And it doesn't have to do with it being a time that God dictates things that, that His Spirit's going to be. No, what it has to do with is our relationship to Him. The high times come when we have a good relationship in touch with God like we should. It's not God's fault because like we should or like we used to. It has to do with our relationship to Him. It's us. It's our decision. That because of that, that we need to be much prayerful. Prayerful, it might be the right, much prayerful to the Lord. Things are going good. Even, maybe even especially when things are going good. Keep going. It's important. It doesn't have to be a low time spiritually for you. It doesn't have to be a difficult time mentally for you. Because we can still have faith. We can still be. No matter whether it's high time or low time, we are to be instant in faith. Instant in our faith. At all times. Now, this sin cycle that we find going on. And see, the thing is, when you get to verse 1, I'm going to point out something that verse 1, now at the death of Joshua came to pass, the children of Israel asked the Lord, saying, Who shall be first to go up? The leaders, these elders, they would call on God and say, God, should we go up and fight these people or not? And God would come back with the message to the leader and say, and that's the whole way they took over the land. Joshua would go to the Lord and these elders, and God would tell them, go up and fight these people. And they would go and they'd fight and they would win. Right? And one time God had sent word, go up and fight, and they wouldn't go up and fight. And then the people were, it got bad. And then they come and say, we will go up, we will go up. And then the word came back and said, don't go up now. Presumptuously. They went up anyway. And they were just defeated and just slaughtered. Because the thing is if God tells you to do it, it's going to be okay. Do something, it's going to be okay. But if God's not leading you, don't be presumptuous to go up and to do it yourself. We have to be careful about it. You say, well, preacher, I'm not sure whether God wants me to do this. Is think about the rights and wrongs. Is it right? Is there anything wrong in this? And go with what's right. A lot of times God kind of sits back to see if we're going to make right choices in our life. Okay? And you come back to the right choices. Well, Moses had led them as a nation. Now Joshua died. And here we are in the book of Judges. And what do they do? Okay? See, what they really should have been doing here is brought us to the land. Now who's going to take Joshua's place? Who's going to lead us? Who's going to beseech you for us in the place of Joshua? That's not what we see going on in verse 1. No. Instead of, they're not calling on God to say, God, we need a new leader to take his place, to lead us. They just bypass that altogether. Instead, they just go straight to God and say, hey, it was more like as if, tell us, because see, all these people couldn't go into the land and fight. So who should do it? So Lord, we know that we're supposed to go and to do this. Now just tell us who you want us. But you see, I think that the problem began right here in the book of Judges. I think it begins right here. Because I think they were asking God already made up. They automatically knew they didn't need another Joshua. They didn't need a Moses. All the elders that were with Joshua now had died. So all the leaders that had led them into victory now were gone. These men of faith. Leaders in place. And they're like, well, we don't need no other godly man like that. We're godly enough ourselves. We can do it ourselves. I hope if we learned anything from Genesis chapter 1 and part of 2, is that God's got an order for everything. He's got an order. Day 1, day 2, God had an order of things. And he continues with this order going through the Bible, this order of 7. So God's got that. He's life. He's got my life. And he's got a place he wants us. He's got a people that he wants us with. It's so easy, though, see, to just get a little high-minded and get to thinking that, well, I got this now. I don't need things the way you've been doing. They didn't need these leaders at all. Why, they just as good as Joshua. It ain't always a matter of being as good. God's got an order of things, And if then you're getting off on the wrong foot. I feel like that is true in lots of churches today. Lots of religious circles, I think we have problems today. For instance, there's a lot of churches, they can't keep a preacher, but they ain't all that way. They are not all. Can't keep it. And if you've ever been to several, you know what I'm saying. It's the gospel truth. But the one particular one that comes to my mind, and it was probably 25 years ago they had a man and they kept that man. Everything was good for at least a good spell. I mean, he was there for over 10 years. But once that man left, I want you to know that church has never up 2 or 3 years. And I know that because I walked down the hall and I was reading it. They had that Hall of Fame where the preachers. You ever been to a church like that? They got. And in that hallway they had every preacher, that had been there. And they had the dates. And so it was public knowledge. You walk up and I'm like, I walk. I'm like, oh, you know what? Since that man right there, they ain't kept a man long in 2 or 3 years. And so the last fellow they got in that church, dominant families in that church. He was family in that family. And so I'm like, it just ain't. It's problems, there's big problems there. I mean, there's times they've had a funeral and they'd have to call the sheriff up there to keep trouble. I mean, there was a woman one time they got because she was packing, and there was, they had the people, they had the officers, for that time when that was, it was kind of a rough place. Oh, by the way, the one that was in the family, I don't think he made 2 years. But it was always the same thing every time. Not here. There's a scenario. They get a man, and then they put it on the internet, and they tell everybody, this is a man, this is a God man right here. If we've ever, he's called a God. And then about 2 or 3 years later, he's all the devil. We can get rid of this guy. And so what happens is the preacher leaves the church way back, whenever, way back. And the people that, they get a little corrupt. Now there's always going to be a group. It's not that people that are in charge is a bad thing. Because somebody has to. Somebody. Look, there's something or another going. There's always got to be group. I mean, there's got to be officers. There's got to be people that are doing this stuff, right? So it's not a wrong thing that you have people that have more control than others, and normally it comes back to officers. But those people, that's the thing. If these people are not really close to God, there's where the problem comes in right there. I mean, you know, and so we have so many churches, and above that, by the way, it goes up to hierarchy, corruption. People aren't obedient to the Lord. They're not going to do it God's way. And I'm going to tell you, it sums up the whole book. And you'll see it said over and over and over again in Judges. Because the whole book of Judges is that the people are sinning and God sends a deliverer out of the bondage. And he delivers them, and then they fall back into sin again and back into captivity. And God sends another deliverer, and he delivers them all the way through Judges. It's like the cycle of people even today. They get right with the Lord, and the next thing you know, they fall in their faith, and they full if it wasn't for that. All the people that's ever come and sat on these pews, where are they? Except for the people get their hearts right, and the next thing you know, this, that, whatever excuse, whatever the reason, and everybody's got a different one, and then next thing you know, they ain't going. And I'm going to just tell you this. Until we, number one, become faithful to start, he's not going to give us step two. I don't think we're going to see step two until we get step one right. And I think that's the problem here. I think that's the problem in a lot of churches today. So God has, and I think that goes on a lot later. Today, what they want to do is and it's interesting to me that in a lot of the even if they ain't big, but they're bigger than a lot. They feel when they go to get a preacher, these days listen, a new minister, they have his resume now. Application might be a better word, and the pastor, if they're put in for that position of the church, get bigger and bigger, these applications, questions that's on there. And then they talk to the man, they talk to him, you know, about it. Basically, out here in the world, and so you have this application to fill out, and you're supposed to turn in your resume. And you can go online to Freeable Baptist, original Freeable Baptist, you can go online to the organization. They'll tell you to send in your applications into the church. You say, well, what's wrong with that? Isn't that the way people hire today? Well, yeah, I mean, if you're hiring somebody, you're the boss, and you're looking for somebody for the job, and you're hiring, then you have, you know, that's a good way to go about that. Every other business in the world. And the problems come in is that the church pays the salary, then they have every bit of right to say, well, we expect this, and we expect that, and we expect this other. Therefore, this is what we want. Now, there ain't a thing no wrong with that kind of order. Except, church is just not supposed to be like every other business in the world. An order of things for the New Testament church. And the way that order should be is it should begin with the pastor, the bishop of the church, officers of the church. And thirdly is the congregation as a whole to make the decisions and to keep the work going. Okay? Well, if we get that, things ain't gonna go well in the church. And if we go come back and do this thing like a job, and here feel like they have a right to tell people up here what they ought to do. And if they don't follow what they say, instead of ministry, we run into that problem a lot today. The last verse of Judges said, and there was no kings in that day, and the people did what was right. That's it right there. That's it. That's where and there's a lot of different ways you can put this, okay? But that's always been the problem. The people doing what's right in their own eyes. They know what to do. The people don't need to follow the word of the Lord. The people are as good as those. Same thing went all the way back to the garden, really. Like I said, you can look at it a different way. God said, I'm going to put of that tree. The devil come around, got in that serpent, said, oh no, it's okay. God don't know what he's talking about. Go ahead. It's all right. And what did Adam and Eve do? What was right in their own eyes. That's what it comes down to. That verse is mentioned over and over and over. And it's a spiral downward for Israel. And where are we at? Hey, where are we at? We think we know. We don't need to follow God's order, God's direction. Just tell us how you want to do this, God. Don't tell us what to do. Don't tell us to listen to somebody in our own eyes. I have found that when I follow the order that God has laid out, but a lot of times if I take it in my own hands, you know, do it God's way. That's what I'm saying. Now, I don't know what you're going to get out of that. I don't know what you personally would take home. I have no idea. I never do. And I feel like I get out of it when I read it myself. So we're going to close now. I hit it right on 12 o'clock sharp. We're going to close out. If you want to come and pray about anything, it's open as we stand to sing this closes.